Welcome on in, Dragon Folk. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I know I am. My name is Ashen Wings, and welcome on in to the lair. So today, I am going to be teaching you all how to play Dromai. More specifically, to give my top 5 tips for new Dromai players going into this. But I think I'm going to kind of blend the tips a little bit together. So hopefully it covers all the things that I want to cover, and then also kind of ties it into a nice little bow at the end here. We do have a couple videos that you can check out before you come into this one. Of course, the first video is how to play Flesh and Blood, so if you do not know how to play Flesh and Blood yet, this video may be a little confusing, but you can always go ahead and check that video out on the channel. I will leave a link to it in the description. And then, of course, we do also have a video on how to best utilize this right here, Flame Scale Furnace. Now, we have a video that I just came out with in regards to why this is an important card. I will talk about it here during this guide, so if you want to know more about Flamescale Furnace, you can check that video out as well. But anyway, let's go over Dromai, right? So, you've decided, hey, I want to get some dragons in my life, right? I want to summon some dragons, make it a crazy horde of scaled beasts who plan to, destroy my opponent in every way possible. And you're just looking for that cool illusionist vibe. Well, Dromai, being the only illusionist currently available in Classic Constructed, she's obviously got a lot to do here. But how well she does it is actually all dependent on you, right? The player themselves, this is a very difficult deck to start. It's not just summon dragons, do summon dragon things, right? There are several factors you have to look into when you're looking to play Dromai, and I'm going to kind of go into a few of them today, and at least the most important ones in regards to the mechanics that this deck has. So, first we need to look at who Dromai is, right? Let's just take a look at this. Let's just go over Dromai. She has 4 intellect, 40 health, and whenever you pitch a red card, create an ash token. And then if you've played a red card this turn, dragons you control have go again while attacking. So it is so obvious here that red cards are important. Very important, because that is how most of your stuff works. When you pitch a red card to your pitch zone here, you get an ash token. And these ash tokens are how you pretty much play Dromai, as long as you are playing the dragon build. Of course, there is the Dromiris build being thrown around right now, and of course that has its own merits, but I personally like me some dragons, and I feel like they are just as effective. So I went ahead and drew up a sample hand here to kind of show you generally how making ash works. For instance, we have in our hand a bunch of 0-cost cards. Now, you can run less 0-cost cards and more of the 1-cost cards, but of course, it doesn't really matter, right? Getting a mix of both is nice, especially since you can utilize these to kind of finish off your combos and so on and so forth. But in this situation, we can do something along the lines of this, where our first move here is to, of course, make ash. We don't have any ash right now, and luckily we didn't draw into any dragons, so we don't have to worry about there being dragons in this case. But ash generation is probably going to be your first thing that you are going to want to do in this game. So as many ash as you can possibly get out, you're going to want to get out. So in this scenario, we have a Dunebreaker Centipede, which you need to pay 1 for. You then have a Blaze Headlong for 0, Dust Up for 0, and a Burn Them All for 0. So in this situation, you kind of got to look at all this stuff. I'm not going to go over like the hand in general, but you're going to want to start by playing that Dunebreaker Centipede. You play that Dunebreaker Centipede, and personally, I would pitch this Burn Them All. Therefore, you paid 1 resource to play this card. That 1 resource happened to be a red card. So then you get 1 ash. And so now that you have 1 ash, right, this is your hand that's left here. Obviously, you attack with your Dunebreaker Centipede. Let's say they don't pop Phantasm, which I will go over in a little bit here what Phantasm is. They go ahead and they take the 5 damage. You can then come in with a Blaze Headlong, for your second attack, and then a Dust Up for your third attack. And if this one hits, you create an Ash token and then transform up to one Ash you control into an Ashwing. So you are possibly getting, if this hits, 2 Ash or 1 Ash and an Ash Wing, which is just a smaller dragon located right over here. And so that's just a smaller dragon that you get to summon using an Ash, right? So this is a pretty good starting hand. It gives you an Ash, right? You've got stuff to utilize it with. Now let's show you just what, some general equipment. Let's say you're running Royal Dromai, but we won't worry about a Dromai deck tech right now. I mainly just wanted to focus on this card right here. But this is how you would play out a hand, right? Now, obviously, there's a lot more to it, and there are more one-cost cards in your deck. These one-cost cards are going to help you build Ash, and there are even a few of them that help create Ash. For instance, if Dunebreaker Senpai is in fact destroyed by the Phantasm effect, then you do get to create an Ash token. So whether or not they destroy it or they take the damage, you're going to get another Ash out of it at the end of the day. Here, we have a list of a few of the one-cost cards that do exist in your deck that are reds. And you're going to want to usually start your turn off with any of these, especially this one if you happen to have the Ash for it. And I'll show you why, right? So it's the same concept you saw with Dunebreaker Senpai. We had to pitch the one, make an Ash. Same deal goes with Spears of Surrealty. This is essentially the same card, except when this gets destroyed by Phantasm, no other effect happens. Sweeping Blow is one of your better Ash generating cards because when you attack with it, you create an Ash as well. So if you pitch a red card, and then you also attack with Sweeping Blow, you technically get 2 Ash as opposed to 1, which is value. We like to get more Ash. The more Ash you can get saved up, the better. Rake the Embers is a pretty awesome action. It's not an attack, so you should play this essentially before you start doing chain stuff if you have a deck that worries about chains. And no, not that chain. But you create an Ash token with Rake the Embers, so you would pitch a red for Rake the Embers, and then you would make an Ash with Rake the Embers, therefore making 2. But of course, you want to get as much value as you can out of Rake the Embers. So at most points, you're going to end up transforming 3 Ash you control into Aether Ashwings. So you're going to want to have at least 3 Ash in order for you to play this. You could very well have 2 and then pitch a red and then play this. That'll bring you up to 4 Ash. And then you will come back down to 1 after you've made your 3 Ashwings. And then Billowing Mirage is another 1-cost attack. When you attack with it, you transform up to 1 Ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. So a tip from me to you, not that you're normally going to ever not do, or not that you're normally ever going to do this, but just know that anything that says the transform, normally it will say up to 1 Ash you control, which means that you can choose 0. So choosing 0 is fine. If you end up drawing a pretty big dragon or something that you want to summon, you don't have to play. You don't have to transform your 1 Ash into a Ashwing, right? Because if you do not, I'll show you why. Because you're going to want to have at least 1 floating Ash at all times, and that is because we are going to talk about the dragons. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the dragons now. We're not going to get too big into what these dragons do specifically, but just know that each of them have their own cost. For instance, Invoke Dominia costs you 4 resources. Invoke Hyloria costs you 1, whereas somebody like Invoke Azalai costs you 0. And even Tomultai costs you 5. So there are quite a few dragons in here that cost a variety of different resource costs. Anywhere between 0 to 6, right, is where you're looking at for these. And the important part is that you need Ash in order to summon your dragons, which is why Ash is so important. Because if you don't have any Ash available here, your Ash is just gone, then you cannot summon dragons. That's just the rules. So I'll go ahead and show an example, for instance. Let's say it is my turn, right? I have arsenaled on my last turn. My opponent has done their thing, and maybe they've decided to pass, right? I'm sitting here in my hand with a Dunebreaker Centipie, Blaze Headlong, Invoke Kyloria, and a Burn Them All. Well, I cannot summon Kyloria right now because how this works is when you play Invoke Kyloria, it targets an Ash. And because you do not have an Ash, you cannot play this card. And no, you cannot pitch a red for Kyloria and then make the Ash with Dromai and then have it target the Ash. That's not the layer step in which this goes into, which is where there's a lot of like extra knowledge, which we can go over in a separate video. But just know that if you have no Ash, you cannot invoke a dragon. You can't invoke any of them. You can't even invoke you can't even play Billowing Mirage and then transform an Ash because you don't have one. So having a Ash floating at all times is incredibly important for your dragons to be summoned, because if you end up pulling an entire hand full of dragons, well, you can't play them. So you essentially just have to pass your turn. So in a situation like this, if you wanted to make a dragon, you very well could play Dunebreaker Centipie, pitching a Burn Them All, and then you get an Ash for that, right? And as long as Phantasm is not, activated here, you will get the Ash, and then you will gain the Go again from Dunebreaker Centipie. At this point, what you can do is you can break the chain and then play Invoke Kyloria, targeting your Ash, and then pitching for its cost. Let's say it's the red here, Blaze Headlong. That will lose you the Ash from Invoke Kyloria, but then make you the Ash from Blaze Headlong. So therefore, it is what they call Ash neutral. 1-cost dragons make you go Ash neutral if you're pitching a red, and that's very important. And so now you have your dragon. Now, you need to flip your dragon to the other side in order for it to become a summoned thing. But essentially what happens is you take one of these Ash here, and you put Kyloria on top of that Ash. But now Kyloria has an Ash under it. So what an Ash does is gives your dragons Phantasm. And now here we are finally going to talk about what Phantasm is. Phantasm is a keyword that essentially says, as it is here, when this is defended by a non-illusionist attack action card with 6 or more attack, destroy this and close the combat chain. Now, you may think to yourself, right, Dromai's pretty cool. I just get to summon a whole bunch of dragons, and then I'm going to have a wide board of dragons, and I'm just going to keep throwing them at my opponent, and I'm going to be able to win, because I'm going to be able to make dragons so often, it's going to be so crazy. The answer to that is no. You're probably not going to be able to do that, because first and foremost, you have to deal with Phantasm. Most of your attacks, including even things like Dunebreaker Centipie, have Phantasm. A lot of your illusionist actions will in fact have Phantasm, because that's just the illusionist keyword. And so, for instance, if Dunebreaker Centipie was played and you just pitched for it, let's say you didn't have Kyloria out on the board yet, you still had him in hand. At this point, if your opponent decides to block Dunebreaker Centipie with a 6 power or more non-illusionist attack, this will essentially close the chain, and then you will not have another action point to summon Kyloria. So it is unfortunate, and this is again another workaround that you have to do when you're playing dragons. And this is, again, the same deal with dragons. If you go into attack with Kyloria, and your opponent plays a Command and Conquer, for instance, or Spinal Crush, when they play something like that, Kyloria is, as they call in the game, they say it is popped, right? That is the term popper, is because this essentially gets like popped into existence, or out of existence, I should say. It essentially goes right on into your discard pile. Your Ash gets destroyed, and then you move on with your day, right? At that point, the combat chain ends, and you are not able to do anything else. So even if you did play a red card and you had several of these dragons, your dragons would lose all of their go again opportunities because one of them was popped by a phantasm popper. So that's the idea behind Phantasm, right? Phantasm is something to definitely look out for, and it is a huge thing. Normally, the only time you're going to run into a lot of Phantasm popping is into Brutes and Guardians. So not too huge of a deal. Some other decks do run them, right? Obviously, Command and Conquer is a generic card that is a 6 power card. So keep that in mind if you are going to, go into a match that you may think they have a Command and Conquer. So then we have to worry about the other downfall of dragons, which is the fact that, one, they are their own being. So, you're not shooting out attacks from yourself. Your dragons are attacking, not you, which means that your weapon is useless if you don't have any dragons, right? You can't attack with this thing. So it is very important that that is the case. That this is your whole purpose behind this is to summon dragons. You cannot attack with your weapon like Dory can. You can't attack like Phi can. You can't attack like Bravo can. You don't have a weapon with an attack value. The second thing that sucks is that these dragons can't be defended. You cannot take any of your cards from your hand. For instance, let's say somebody was coming in with a 2 power attack. Normally, you would be able to block that if they were attacking you, right? It would block that 2 power attack. But instead, if they decide to attack Kyloria, because Kyloria only has 2 HP, as noted in the bottom right of the card, you cannot choose to block that attack for Kyloria. Kyloria essentially has no other choice but to take that on the chin and die, which is very unfortunate for you because now you've lost a dragon. The third thing that really hurts there in that situation is that attacking the dragons also activates on-hit abilities. So for instance, if you are, if your opponent plays a Snatch and they go in to attack Kyloria, Kyloria cannot defend. And you, as Dromai, cannot defend your dragon. Which means that when they come in and they attack Kyloria with a Snatch, they will be able to draw a card because it will hit and it will kill Kyloria. So there's a lot of value on decks that have on-hit abilities in regards to coming in and attacking dragons, right? So in certain decks that run a lot of on-hit stuff, you're going to want to kind of worry about maybe either have to have too many dragons or no dragons at all, because too many dragons will overwhelm them and they'll essentially have to start focusing on that. Or if there's no dragons, then they can come right at you and you can block it efficiently, any on-hit abilities that your opponent might have. Another thing that is unfortunate is that when these cards attack, right, and they have that go again because of you played a red card, right, first and foremost, playing the dragons, all the dragons are red, so that activates every one of the abilities. So you've played a red card by playing Invoke Kyloria. That means that you can pitch for Flamescale Furnace. You can pitch for, or your dragons get go again, I should say, and that moves on. Another thing that ruins this is the fact that, again, they can be attacked and targeted just like you can. So if your opponent has something like an Aether Dart or an Aether Ice Vein, and they can just deal arcane damage to your dragon whenever you declare them as an attacker, that dragon will die, the combat chain will close, no other dragons will gain go again, and your turn is over. So there are plenty of ways for your opponents to essentially just shut you down entirely and never allow you to get a long chain of dragons out to attack. Now, sometimes it works out in your favor, and you're able to get a ton of dragons out, and it does real great. But in most cases, it doesn't work out that way. So there are several downsides to dragons as well as upsides, but the upsides are very, very threatening. They're threatening. They have multiple different abilities. There's several different kinds of dragons. And so it's, your opponent has to know what dragon does what. They have to know what its threat level is compared to the other ones. For instance, Kyloria, their ability is that whenever it hits a hero, gain control of an item they control, and if you don't gain control of an item this way, draw a card. So essentially, if you get an on-hit ability with Kyloria, you get a hit. If your opponent doesn't control any items, right? No energy potions, no time snap potions, no mechanologist items, you just get to draw a card. So that is value in and of itself, right? It's essentially just Snatch, but as a dragon. And again, I'll go in detail what each of the dragons do over in a different video, but right now I kind of want to just touch on that and show you what summoning a dragon is like. So again, you need to have Ash already available in order to make dragons, and if you do not, you will end up just having dead hands with dragons you can't do anything for. Now, of course, if you are ever in a situation where, let's say, you don't have any Ash, and you have something like this in your hand, right? Flip that over. There you go. So let's say you have something like this in your hand, right? You have no one-cost cards other than Kyloria, but you can't play Kyloria. You just can't do it. So in most situations, what you can do here is I still would not play this Burn Them All just yet, simply because in this specific scenario, we only have one red card in our discard zone. But what you can do is you can play Blaze Headlong, and then in response to you playing Blaze Headlong, you can then use Flamescale Furnace's ability to pitch this Burn Them All. And now, unfortunately, because you didn't play a red card, Blaze Headlong does not get go again. So you cannot then summon Kyloria with the Ash that you made from Flamescale Furnace. But you now have an Ash, and that's what's important. At this point, you can do one of two things. You can put either of these cards into the arsenal and then just pass it up to your opponent, or you can keep them both in hand, whatever you might do. Personally, I would put this Dust Up into the arsenal because it is a zero-cost end of the turn kind of, a finisher, if you would. So having it in the arsenal is not too bad. But now you see you had to take an emergency, almost waste of a turn, nowhere near as efficient as it would be, simply because you did not have an Ash available on your turn. So it is very important that you have that. Very important you have Ash. I cannot stress that enough. Very important you have Ash. All right, new hand situation. Let's say you are here right now. We're going to just throw this guy off to the side here. Let's say you've got all these dragons out, right? And your opponent has not done anything to do anything about this, right? It is the beginning of your turn, and you have all this out. Now, you cannot just go in and start attacking with dragons. We talked about this specifically with the red cards, right? You're almost always going to want to start your turn by playing a red card, which is why a good portion of your deck is, in fact, red. So in this situation, we have a couple cards. Dust Up is a red card, but it does not have natural go again. So unfortunately, not much we can do here in regards to, doing much more with our dragons. But what we do have is a Ravenous Rabble. Ravenous Rabble is a red card that does have natural go again, and of course comes in for possibly 4 damage, which it in fact would come in for 4 damage. So, in this situation, if you wanted to attack with all of these dragons, you would need to first play Ravenous Rabble, and then when you play that, all of your dragons now have go again, which means that now you can then attack with an Ashwing, and then with an Asfly, and then with a Kyloria, and then with a Dromai, and that's your whole turn. A huge turn of attacking with dragons. But what happens if you don't get a red, right? If you don't get a red, what are you possibly going to do in this scenario? Well, unfortunately, if you don't get a red that has any natural go again, or anything like a Dunebreaker Centipie, or anything of that sort, if you don't have anything that has natural go again, unfortunately, you're only going to be able to attack with one dragon. Now, in this scenario, right, for those of you who know how to play Dromai, you know exactly what I'm looking at. But for the most part, you're only able to attack with one dragon. So at this point, you would want to choose what dragon is the most important and attack with that to give you the better advantage. So, little pro tip from me to you, if you happen to only draw blues for some reason, or yellows, in this situation, you could attack with Dromai first. When you attack with Dromai, you get an action point, which means that then you can attack again. And so that is really nice because it just works out in your favor to then attack with a Kyloria. So, but because you don't have Go again, you cannot actually utilize the rest of your dragons. So it's still a pretty poor turn. Of course, if your opponent decides to take both of these hits, well, I mean, 7 damage is 7 damage and you get to draw a card, so not too bad. But you're always going to want to play a red card at the beginning of your chain because it is just going to make things easier. Even when you summon dragons, when you invoke dragons, that is you playing a red card. So if you have a dragon in hand and you have Ash and you invoke it, that's you playing a red card. So you're at least playing a red card. Make sure that the first thing you do on your turn is play a red card. Because if you don't, you're going to lose a lot of value. And I'm not going to lie, I think that's pretty much it. I think we've kind of covered just about everything in regards to playing Dromai at a very basic level. The things you're, again, going to want to look out for is you're going to want to make sure that you generate a lot of Ash. So even if you're playing a card that, costs 2 resources, you're going to want to try to pitch 2 red resources to make 2 Ash, and then do whatever that card does, right? Like Command and Conquer, for instance. That is going to be important because the faster you get your Ash loaded up, the better your hands are when you have a bunch of dragons. And that is just how it's going to make your life easier, I promise. Then, of course, talking about Ash generation, we do have these cards over here that you can play that are 1-cost cards that tend to do pretty well as far as Ash generation goes. You also have Flamescale Furnace, which helps a lot in regards to making Ash. And again, you can check the video that I have posted on our channel here on more tips and tricks on how to effectively use Flamescale Furnace. Then we talked about Phantasm and how Phantasm essentially is the bane of your dragon's existence as well as many of your attacks. And we also went over summoning a dragon and the strengths and weaknesses of the dragons themselves. It's not all sunshine and rainbows when you summon a bunch of dragons. Your opponent may have a lot of on-hit abilities that target dragons, or may have poppers in their hand, which pop your Phantasm, to destroy your dragons and effectively end your turn early before you're able to do anything efficient. So that's Dromai. Hopefully you learned a little bit today. Hopefully it was, a bit more in-depth than one would think. I kind of went over some generalized basics as far as playing Dromai goes. But of course, there's several other things to get into it. There's very advanced methods into Dromai, but I think as long as you keep these core concepts to yourself, you're not going to have a bad time with Dromai at all. Again, right, Ash. Make sure you have Ash for your dragons. Make sure that you understand the idea behind Phantasm and that it pretty much just ends your turn in most cases. And then, of course, playing reds are very important. Playing reds allow you to continue to move in through your turn, and pitching reds allow you to make Ash, which is very important as well. So let me know in the comments down below whether or not you learned anything from this video today. I'd also love to hear any other tips and tricks you might have for Dromai that maybe I did not cover in this video. I definitely like playing Dromai. She's a very, very fun hero to play. Although certain matchups certainly are not too favorable for her, but you can find ways around that with a lot of testing and a lot of really, it's still just testing. Testing. That's what you want to do with decks like this. Dromai is not just summon dragons and go face. There are layers and layers of difficulty to this hero that a lot of people do not really know. So let me know if you want any advanced tips that I could possibly think of for this hero. And let me know what you think, right? Is this enough for you to kind of try Dromai out at your armory? Well, while you're down there writing that comment, make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the channel as well if you have not already. I like to make these small little guides so people have a better understanding of the hero themselves and kind of know where to start. as far as trying a new avenue in Flesh and Blood. So hopefully this helped. And you can also support the channel in a more monetary sense if you wish by joining our Patreon in the link in the description. We do also have the channel memberships here on the channel. I believe for a whopping, what did I put it at? $2? $5? It's probably at $5. For $5, you can join the channel membership here and support the channel. And it's great. And I love your faces for it. It's absolutely amazing if you do anything of that sort. It really, really helps me out as a content creator. But it's absolutely not necessary. So thank you all so much for watching. I do truly appreciate your support. And I will see you all very soon. Nerd out.